We're going to begin this hour with NASA planning to launch its Artemis 1 moon mission this Saturday. We're taking a look back at a key moment in the history of the space program. Ed Dwight Jr. was almost the first black astronaut in space. He was selected by President John F. Kennedy to join the astronaut program, but was not ultimately picked for the famed 1969 Apollo mission to the moon. So you may be wondering, like I was, why are we doing a story about someone who almost was? Well, national correspondent Jerika Duncan spoke with Mr. Dwight about how that changed his life and his mission.
I sit down at the table over there to get it ready for casting.
Inside 88-year-old Ed Dwight's art studio in Denver, Colorado, is a collection of stories told through the sculptures he creates.
This is one of the Buffalo soldiers. He was Corporal Clinton Greaves, and he was one of the 18 Medal of Honor winners during the Indian fighting days.
But before Dwight became an artist dedicated to memorializing notable figures in Black history, he had hopes of making history of his own in space.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
When President John F. Kennedy decided to take one step for man, he also made plans to send the first black astronaut to the moon and thought Ed Dwight was a star.
When I got this letter, November the 4th, 1961, offering me this opportunity to be the first Negro astronaut, I thought these dudes were crazy. Why me? I mean, what in the world is this all about? You know, and I said no. I mean, my first reaction to it was, that's the nuttiest thing I ever heard.
At the time, Dwight was a 27-year-old Air Force pilot who had to be convinced to take the leap.
I consulted my mother, and my mother's telling me about all this stuff that I could do as a symbol, and think of you know, all the kids, you'll get excited.
Your mother tells you this is bigger than you. This is you representing African Americans.
Exactly.
This is definitely a sign of progress for the Negro in the country.
As the first African American astronaut candidate, Dwight was considered a source of pride within the Black community. He toured the country promoting his newfound journey, but when he returned to the space program, he faced a new frontier of opposition.
So all these white folks that I'm dealing with, I mean, my peers and the leadership was just horrified at the idea of the president appointing me to this position.
You were known as the Kennedy boy.
Yeah, I was the Kennedy boy.
After 4 years of intense training, NASA decided Dwight did not have what it took to be an astronaut. The man, dubbed Kennedy's boy, was quickly brought down to earth.
Why aren't you an astronaut now?
Well, I couldn't begin to tell you.
Astronaut dreams dashed, Dwight left the Air Force in 1966. He worked at IBM and started several businesses, including a construction company.
Every evening I would go to each one of my sites and all the copper and the steel and pieces of stuff that were left over, and I'd throw them in the back of my Mercedes, and I'd go home, and then I had to teach myself how to weld.
One person who took note was his friend and Colorado's first black lieutenant governor, George Brown, who saw Dwight's work and encouraged him to pursue it seriously.
George had been to one of my parties and saw this art in my house, and they wanted to do a sculpture of me for the Capitol. And I said, well, that's not what I do. And he says, you're going to become one of the famous sculptors in the United States of America when I get through with you. And I laughed at him. I said, George, you are full of stuff.
Since then, Dwight has created nearly 20,000 gallery pieces and more than 130 memorials across the country, honoring those hidden figures of Black history.
I had never sculpted before. I was 45 years old like this.
He says his favorite memorial is the one he did at the Texas State Capitol.
200 images of people on that Texas memorial, and they all have different personalities, and they all have different dreams, and I wanted to put that in their faces.
A long way from space, these sculptures give us a better sense of the world in which we live. Had you been the first Black astronaut into space?
You know, I probably would have done the same thing that Black guys did go into space. You know, that became the highlight of their life experience. Because I wouldn't have done anything, I probably wouldn't have done anything else.
Does it still bother you today that you were not the first?
That didn't bother me. It was a great opportunity, and all the little parts and pieces of everything you see in the studio and all those buildings down there is a manifestation of what I learned in the years that I was in that program.
What do you want your legacy to be?
You know, the legacy I want is that I gave a damn. And that's it.
A legacy sculpted by the history he's determined to preserve. For CBS Mornings, Jerika Duncan, Denver, Colorado.
I like him a lot. I like that legacy as well.
I like that legacy too. Yeah. I was thinking, Mr. Dwight, we might steal that one. But I think it's so interesting. You know, they always say when one door closes, another one opens, because certainly he wouldn't be doing that. And he's really very good. Oprah often says, God can dream a bigger dream than you can dream for yourself. When you look at that, you see it's amazing.
Yeah, when one door closes, the window opens. And he is incredibly talented as a sculptor. I mean, those figures are so realistic.
Absolutely true. But, you know, Tony, when you get rejected that way, you're not thinking, oh, something better's coming along. It's still a very big blow.
I'm sure there were some low moments there after
but
the
it worked
astronaut
out
program.
okay.
It worked out just
Nicely
fine.
done.
And by the way, it wasn't mentioned in the piece, but he's been married for 56 years. That is
I like
also
that.
a heck of an accomplishment.
I like that.
I like it as well.